Welcome back to the Fixed with Coop channel. We're home now. Why? Because Beauty left us stranded. So I took this today to go see my friend Tim at his house. Tim has a bunch of Model T and A rat rods, and he builds a lot of cool stuff. But he's also one of those guys that just has everything. Like, oh, come on over, pick through it, whatever you need. He's one of those guys. Great guy. Maybe one day we'll get him on the channel. Maybe. We'll see. But anyways, I've driven this car all summer. I've probably done 2 oil changes on it, so roughly like 6,000 miles. And I have had 0 problems with it. Today, I get off the highway, I stop to get gas. I go to fire the car back up, and it's like super slow at starting. And I'm like, oh, so I turned it off and did it again. Wouldn't start at all. I was literally less than a mile, not even from my buddy Tim's house that I was going to see. As you can see here, you can see some bad wiring. I drove on the highway from my neck of the woods to Tim's, and it's roughly like 18 miles on the highway. Car ran fine, got off the highway. It was running on battery, and I think it was running on battery from not today, but last night. I drove home from a friend's house, and I noticed that the headlights, even on the high beams, were just super, super dim. And I was like, oh, something's going on. Didn't even think of it. Windows, the electric windows were really, really slow. I got a charge on the battery. Car fired right up. Was able to get it right to Tim's house, and then we were like, oh, the alternator's got to be dead. So we did a quick test on it. It wasn't throwing on any voltage. All right, he's got a bunch of the spare ones over there. We're just going to swap it out real quick, right? Actually being like my luck, usually it's catastrophic and absolutely terrible. It was very simple. It was this thing here. You can see the wires just broke. So it was never charging. It was just running off straight battery. So real quick, he had a bunch of old alternators. So we just took a pigtail off. He didn't have any crimpers left. He's like, I literally just ran out wire and stuff. So we just did the old high school twisteroo with some electrical tape, and it was enough to get me home. And it's funny that happened, because when I changed this alternator in the car, the original one was clocked differently. The terminal was actually over here on the alternator, so the wiring harness came right into here, no problem. But since I put this one in, it changed it to over here, so that's probably why I put a little bit more stress on it. So I had bought a brand new pigtail that I had never wired in just because it worked, and I was lazy. So it looks like now I have my excuse to wire in a pigtail to give myself a little bit more room here. So we'll solder those ends in, reconnect that back together, and we should be good. I drove the car like 20-something miles home, back roads, a lot longer, but then when I get stuck on the highway with it twisted like that, and it was perfectly okay. So we'll get that fixed, and then maybe we'll talk about some other stuff. I got some exciting parts that came in and some cool stuff. Let's check the parts out first, actually. So at Tim's house, he gave me 2 GM alternators, which are just chilling there. I have rebuilt those before, and the rebuild kits are like 20 bucks on eBay, or they're like probably 60 bucks at the parts store. So they're either good cores, or they're gonna be rebuildable. Then he also hooked me up with some Model A rims, which are Ford rims. The spoke rims, they're 16s. They look like they're about 16 by about 5. So they'll take a nice 16-inch tire for the front of the rat rod. The only downfall that I kind of have with those, but it's not really downfall, is I purchased Chevy brakes and spindles and everything for Chevy lug pattern, which is 5 by 4 3/4. Those are Ford, which are 5 by 5.5. It's like the 80s truck ones. Not that big of a deal. I was just thinking that get a machinist to drill out the brake rotors and put new studs in there. That way they match those, as well as I can keep my Chevy stuff. I have 4 rims and tires that originally came on the 51 that I was going to use for the Model T. So we'll see. I kind of want to use those because I feel like that's just traditional rat rod. So we'll get those sandblasted. We'll get them painted up nice and cherry red like they're supposed to be. And we'll start hopefully assembling this car sooner than later. So the frame kit obviously is here still. It has not moved. I think that's going to be right about where ride height is. I did scoop myself up a bell housing for the Saginaw. It's soaking in some brake cleaner and Dawn dish soap. Just it was coated in grime. Obviously, it's New England, so it's leaf season. But these came in the mail yesterday. Not this. I got this from Tim. That's a Panhard bar. But I got some hairpin style radius rods. Pretty stoked about those. A very old school classic look. And these brackets here are actually made specifically for the S10 rear, because the S10 rear is like 2 5/8 versus your typical 3-inch rear axle. I put them on the axle and they literally fit like a glove. Got all the Heim joints and all the bolts and stuff, as well as the front brackets that go to weld on the bottom of the frame, probably somewhere around there like that. And then the front of the radius rod goes through there, and then your rear end sits here. I got traditional hairpins from Speedway, which are more of the rounded radius rod. They look like, a round circle and the radius rod comes out the middle. I prefer these ones. I think these ones look more nostalgic. So I've read and heard different reviews about these. These are from Ron Pope Motorsports in Tennessee. I had bought them on eBay. Pretty reasonable price. A lot of people run them like this. And the bracket goes on the front. Obviously the rear end goes there. And then you can adjust your pinion angle with the adjustable joints in the back, etc. I've also seen people run them like this. I think they look better like that. And I think it makes more sense to run them like that. So I'm going to try to run them like this. I don't know if the brackets are going to allow me to. I think they will, but it's going to take a little bit of time to figure that out. So I just locked in some coil shocks, like coilovers. They're like slightly adjustable. They're actually from a Harley Sportster. A lot of people that I have talked to, they're like, oh, I wouldn't run Harley shocks. Oh, no, they're not made to hold the weight. They're not this, they're not that. In theory, Sportster shocks can carry, I've seen some big dudes ride on those bikes, right? With a passenger, I don't know, 250 a person, 200 pounds per person, and then you could throw 2 people on a bike. I mean, the back only carries, half the weight, but I don't see why they can't hold 400 or 500 pounds. I mean, probably not supposed to, but what's the back of this Model T gonna weigh? I mean, this frame itself probably weighs 150 pounds. The axle, it's not going to carry any weight. It's going to carry its own weight. The shocks essentially will keep the back of the frame up. And that body, I mean, 3 of us lifted it. What's it weigh, 200 pounds? Like, I think with a small gas tank in the back, like 10 gallons, might be a little on the heavier side. But I'm going to give them a shot for 40 bucks. If not, I'll get some 10 or 12-inch automotive coilovers that are adjustable. But I'm seeing that these Harley shocks are like 125 pounds, give or take, with the spring rate. And a lot of people say to run like 180 pounds on T-buckets for coilovers. And when I read, when people run those, that they're still bouncy in the back, like it's too much of a spring rate. So maybe this will be a little bit smoother. I don't know. I see guys, talk about how they run these Harley shocks on the back of their Model A pickup trucks or on the back of their Model A cars. So they're only a 12-inch shock. It'll give me a nice ride height. That Panhard bar, I didn't get any joints for it, so I have to order those. And it's also too wide, so I'm going to have to cut it and re-weld it. I got to figure out whether I'm going to do that or just buy an entire smaller kit, like a 20-inch Panhard bar or something like that, just to hold the rear end in place. But as of right now, let's see. I have all the front suspension, all of it. The front brakes, everything. I have the rear radius rods. I'm going to have the shocks tomorrow. And then either I can make a Panhard bar out of that or figure something out temporarily, obviously, or it's not really going to moving around the shop. So I really could build a rolling chassis in the next week or two with the time that I have. I don't have a ton of spare time, but I do have some to where I can kind of like get things pieced together. If you remember on my earlier videos on the channel, my Corvette actually goes over here in the wintertime. I put it on wheel dollies, move it over, cover it up with the car cover, and then I use a ladder to go up and down in my attic because my wife and I store everything up there. But I'm actually on the hunt. I might throw this thing somewhere else for the winter to store it. I'm waiting to hear back from a buddy if they have room at their shop, and I can store it in there. hopefully for the winter, and to leave open either this bay, so where I can build the Model T in here, leave the 51 here, because if there's no salt on the ground, Grace and I usually drive that around in the wintertime. There's no heat, but we get hot coffee and just covered up with a blanket. We take the dog, we go look at Christmas lights, and we just drive the old car. It's just what we do. So basically, we park her car here in the wintertime. 51 was here last year, and the Corvette was here. I have the Model T body in a lean-to / room that's in the back of the garage, which you've seen me come in here before. The body is back there. Can't see it. Oh, there it is. You can see it over there. But there's actually enough room for me to build this car back here and get it rolling, and probably get it to where I can roll it out of here. That back door comes completely out and you can get the car up. I'll have to build some ramps to get it over that little hump right there, but it's definitely doable. But I would prefer to build this car in here because there's heat in here. Now, in reality, I guess I could kind of put one of my cars in here, the 51 in here, with some ramps and stuff. But like I said, we drive that around the wintertime. So hopefully I can get this into storage this winter. Let's get that alternator wired up. Now, this always seems to happen, right? I lent out my soldering iron to my friend Big Head across the street. He brought that back, but he did not bring back my little coil of solder. So it looks like I'm not soldering it. But I got these bad Larrys off of YouTube, off of Amazon. They're little butt connectors with heat shrink, and it actually has some solder in there. So you get it really hot with a torch. It melts together, and it solders the wires together, and it heat shrinks, which is awesome. The only part that kind of sucks is to really get the solder melted with one of these little guy torches. It kind of does burn up the heat shrink. So what I usually do is I just wrap it with another piece afterwards, and it kind of takes care of business. So let's get this swapped out. That way Beauty's ready to go. Never fails when you're doing stuff. So I actually start peeling this wire loom out, and it looks like this was already butt connected here. And then it was done there. And then that was crimped in to the original one that was in here. So why don't we just redo from here forward, attach this part into there, and then that should be long enough to come back in and connect. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, as you can see, got the little bit of solder there with the two pieces connected. A little heat to it. I gotta let go, right? Of course. Starting to melt. Hang on. We're gonna come back, but you see the gist of how it works. So, put some heat shrink over those as well. And I might even cover, I won't do electrical tape, but they're ready to go. So throw it back together real quick. There's some electrical tape on there. Let's fire her up real quick. See if the alternator's putting out voltage. Well, I think that we're going to end that one off there. Stay tuned for a full build on this soon. I got to do some run around and get some more parts. A couple things from my buddy Trav. I might introduce you to him and give you a link to his channel. So like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you again next time.